We're coming to you tonight for a discussion of the vote by mail process, which is going to take place in this year's election. COVID-19 has done a lot to upset a lot of things in this state, and the election process is no different. Back in May, when we were in session, the General Assembly voted and the governor signed a bill to expand the idea of vote by mail. We've been able to vote by mail for years in Illinois, but the thing is that what we did this year was put in statute a notice provision where notices were sent out and applications were sent out to every voter who voted in recent elections, 2018 and forward were the requirements in the statute. Applications were sent out to every eligible voter in Illinois to say, send back this application and we will send you a ballot so that you can vote by mail. To date, we are at over 1 million, I believe, in the state, and here in the 63rd district, which is not all of McHenry County, but is a big part of it. We have received applications for over 23,000, I believe, vote by mail ballots here just in this district. So it's going to be a different situation for a lot of us. And I know that there are a lot of people out there who are angry. They're angry by the fact that, we have this process in place. There are a lot of people who are afraid that my vote won't count, or somebody may get their ballot counted twice, or what procedures are in place to guarantee that my vote and everybody else's vote is only counted once and it's properly counted. So tonight what I've done is I've invited McHenry County Clerk Joe Tirio here to explain the process of vote by mail and why it is that and what it is that makes this year different. Now, Joe is the county clerk, is the guy that's going to be in charge of this entire process. He is the go-to guy with regard to the distribution of the notices or the applications, the receipt of the ballots back that have been mailed in, the tabulation of those ballots, and the integrity of the system overall. So what I want to do right now is I want to hand it over to Joe and let him give you like a 30,000-foot view of what's going on. And then we're going to get into a little bit more of an in-depth discussion as to how the process works. And then we're going to go to questions. We've received a number of questions from people already that are really good questions. And I think they address most of the issues that I've been hearing from my constituents since this whole thing came about. It's a brave new world. We're just going to have to deal with it. And at this point, then, I'll just hand it over to Joe, and it's all yours, Joe. Go ahead.
All right. Well, thanks, Steve. Appreciate the opportunity to be on and talk with you and the people of the 63rd District and the people of Facebook in general. We've been doing vote by mail, as Steve said, for quite some time, and not a lot has changed as a result of the legislation that was passed this summer, other than the scale of it. So that has been greatly expanded. And in some states, and a growing number of states and jurisdictions, vote by mail is the primary, and in some cases the only means of voting. And so we looked to a lot of those jurisdictions for guidance and for their experience. We've learned a lot in a very short time, thankfully. But the process, remarkably, hasn't changed dramatically with what we've learned, because the process we had leading up to this wasn't a bad process. And so to do a tiny bit of history, in the distant past, you could vote by mail if you had a reason. So if you weren't going to be in town or were going to be in surgery on election day, you could request to vote beforehand, and we're given a ballot that you could then send back by mail. Now you don't need an excuse. Anybody could do it, and it's been that way for years. And the process works, sort of like this. First, there's an application, and that's what's changed probably most in this election cycle, is that the legislation required that we send out applications to a great number of people that did not request them. And so that group of people were the people who voted in the spring of 20 election, the 2019 consolidated election, the 2018 general election, and then we in McHenry County decided to also add the 2016 presidential election. In addition to that, anybody who changed their registration since the primary through, I think it was July 31st, if memory serves me correct, all those people, all in all about 153,000 in McHenry County, got an application. And so to start with, if you don't like voting by mail, if you weren't interested in voting by mail, and you get this piece of mail, it may be unwelcome. Let's just let's put it that way. And so I understand there's some resistance and there's some very gut level feelings about voting by mail, and everyone is entitled to their own opinion about it. Absolutely. So I think I was talking about the what you'll get when you request a ballot from us. So you'll get an envelope. It'll have instructions. Follow those instructions carefully. Fill in the ovals like you do when you show up in person. And then there's a thing called a certification envelope, and that envelope will look something like.
You can tell this is live, folks.
Yes, right. I'm going to hold it back here so you can't read the exact text on there and the name that's on it. But the important thing is that down here in the bottom left corner is a place for you to sign. And it's very important that you put your ballot in that envelope, and you sign that signature box, seal that envelope, and then put it inside the return mail envelope to send it back to us. And what that signature box does, it's analogous to when you go to the polls and they have you sign your name. They ask you who you are and where you live, and you say Joe Tirio and I'm Woodstock, and they say great, and they push a little card across to you to sign. This is the equivalent of that. And you'll send that back to us, or you'll put it in one of our drop boxes. And then when we get it, we put it in this big machine behind here that will measure the dimensions of the envelope, including the thickness and the weight of the envelope, to make sure that there aren't two ballots inside of one envelope or something entirely different inside the envelope. It will date stamp it. It will take a picture of the front of it where the signature is, and then send that to the team that's going to be doing the signature verification. So we have a team of people who will be looking at those signatures, and they're election judges. And if they find a signature that they think doesn't match the one that we have on file, they will have to bring two more judges, one from each party, in addition to themselves, and the three of them have to unanimously agree that that signature on the certification envelope does not match the one on file. And then if that is the case, then that person is notified. And the reasons and how they get notified depend a little bit upon the reasons that they might be disqualified. If the ballot is good, then it goes back through, we refer to this machine as Big Al. It goes through Big Al again. And this time it's the top of it is sanded off to open it. And then election judges will remove the contents from that envelope and prepare those things to be processed, those ballots to be processed. The outer envelope is then set aside, and now your ballot is anonymous again. So it's in a pile of tens of thousands of others just like it, and there's no marking that relates back to you, the individual. We count those ballots in a high-speed tabulator, and that data is then joined with the data that we get from our polling place tabulators to finally come up with the total picture of the election. So that's at 100,000 miles an hour, 40,000 feet up.
So what you're saying is that once the ballot is removed from the envelope, there is no indication as to whose ballot it is or anything like that.
Right.
The ballots are all anonymous. When it goes through Big Al again, and you, and I'm assuming it's scanning the ovals just as it does if you're at your polling place. What happens to that data? What happens to, is that data compiled at that point, or is it just stored and accessible only on election day?
So when we process the ballots to extract from them the votes, that data is locked away until we turn a key to compile that data, and then it's tabulated. Otherwise, it's sitting idle, static in memory and in storage, and is not accessible to me.
All right. Describe the locations of the drop boxes, please. And you know, I know you got one outside the annex building here in Woodstock, but
yes,
where are the others, and how do people access them?
So yeah, let's talk about drop boxes in a couple different contexts. So to start with, drop boxes are new. That is something that wasn't around prior to this summer's change in legislation. And also with everything else that goes along with this legislation, it expires on January 1st. In the areas where they rely on vote by mail, and that is their primary mode of voting, the nature and placement and construction and the treatment and collection of drop boxes is done a lot differently. So the things that I learned when I went to these other jurisdictions taught me a lot about, probably more about drop boxes than anything else. And so when it came to put drop boxes in, I was hesitant on a number of fronts to do much with them, partly because if you look again at these other jurisdictions, their idea of a drop box in many cases probably more closely resembles a dumpster, in that they're about 1,100 pounds. They're made out of heavy gauge steel, and they're built like a Mack truck. And for us to get those at this point would just be a tremendous expense. Not to say that these that we have aren't expensive, but then the question of where you put them, because the minute you put a second one somewhere, you've disenfranchised a whole group of people. So we need to have really a discussion about how many we need to have, how we decide what that number is, and how we decide where we put those drop boxes. Then there's the issue of collection. You know, it's an expensive thing to have somebody traveling around from place to place, and it also exposes the ballots to a certain amount of risk if they're just, you know, trotting around in a van all day. So these are all considerations and things that there are best practices for from these other jurisdictions, and we aren't in the position really to handle those in the way that I think ultimately, if we decide to continue to do this, that I think we should approach them. So that was a big driver behind my my reserved nature in this, and they pose a security risk if they aren't like that 1,100 pound big white dinosaur that requires a forklift to be moved. The one that we have that's outside at 667 Ware Road in Woodstock is 1/4-inch stainless steel. It's bolted to a 6-inch slab of concrete with 3/4-inch stainless steel bolts. It's got 2 big bollards in front of it that are cast iron filled with concrete. We looked at how to mount an ATM, an automatic teller machine, and that's the cue we took for how to mount this drop box. So that's the one that's in front of the admin building. It's watched by a number of cameras. It's lit 24 hours a day, and we feel pretty good about the safety of that box. We have 4 more boxes, and those are located in some of our early voting places, and those are in repurposed tabulators. So we've taken, if you're familiar with that gizmo that you drop your ballot in at the end of your voting process, it's got a flip up lid and little scanner in there, and you drop it in. So we actually found a way to repurpose those, and so we're using those as drop boxes, not the electronic part of it, just the container at the bottom, and taking advantage of the weight and the cumbersome nature of those things to help aid in the security. And they will be observed all the time that they're available by election staff, and they will be emptied every day so that we don't leave the ballots sitting there potentially at risk.
Can you tell us off the top of your head where those 4 locations are?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're at the McHenry Township Office, McHenry City Hall, Lake in the Hills Village Hall, and the Dole Mansion, which is a new location for us.
Okay. Questions? Joe, I've got a bunch of questions here, and I think maybe we should just dive right in, because probably that's going to give everybody the best bit of information that we're going to give. You and I could talk, but let's listen to what the folks have to say.
Okay.
Got one here from Kelly. Kelly wrote in, will there be a ballot locator on the clerk's website so that people can look up their ballot by entering their address? I couldn't find mine on your website yesterday. I guess the question runs toward, will people be able to sample their, or see what the process is for their ballot being actually brought into your office, logged in as having been received, the signature verified and found to be valid, and then of all that. It's a process question. I think it's a good one.
Well, I think her question is maybe a bit different. So we will have the ballot locator and the polling place locator on our website in the next couple of days. So we've been testing it for the last few days. We've had some late breaking news in terms of the 6th congressional district and candidate Redpath, who was in court as to whether or not he would be in there. So he's in there. We were a little reticent to publish too much before we had that resolved. That's resolved. So in the next couple of days, we'll have the sample ballot tool and the polling place locator. To your question, there is I can't believe I forgot to mention this. Another thing you're going to see on the website here very shortly is the ability to sign up for alerts for vote by mail. So if you choose to vote by mail, you'll be able to sign up for alerts, and as your ballot works its way back from you to me, you'll be able to see it travel through the mail stream and then eventually arrive here, and then you'll be notified that your signature was verified, meaning everything is good, or your signature has been challenged, and here are the ways it's being challenged and the things you can do with it.
Is that being run by the Postal Service, or that initial thing, is that being a function of the Postal Service or of the clerk's office? Now, I've signed up for something what I can expect in my post office box. It scans the front of every envelope. Is this going to be pretty much the same type of thing?
It isn't that, but it does require. It's actually it's remarkably complex. But it starts with the people who are printing our ballots and the envelopes. They work with the post office. Them and the post office work with a company called Ballot Tracks. Data from Big Al and other places all come together, and then it comes out in this Ballot Tracks application and in the form of notifications to you about the status of your ballot and where that is. So it's quite a dance between these different parties. It does rely on the USPS for a good deal of the data, though.
Okay, I'm gonna kind of swerve out of away for a moment. Adam has sent in a question. We're talking about mail-in ballots and voting by mail. Are we required to vote by mail, or will in-person voting still be available to us either early or on election day?
So yes, I mean that's a big misunderstanding, and in fact, Secretary of State Jesse White's office sent out a piece of mail yesterday. People are getting it yesterday and today. That led to a great deal of confusion because it seemed to say that the only way you could vote would be by mail. And that is the farthest from the truth. So you will have opportunities to vote on election day in person, to vote early in person, and also to vote by mail, as we've been talking about for the last several minutes. But yes, election day voting and early voting in person, absolutely happening.
Okay, let me then say, let's take that one step further. Personnel, voting judges, people at the polling places. What are you doing in terms of making sure that we have a sufficient number of poll watchers, well, not poll watchers, but election judges to man the various polling places we have around McHenry County? So
this year has been remarkably challenging, not just for me, but throughout the state and the country and around the world, really. The pandemic has, for good reason, made people concerned, especially when you consider that most of our election judges were probably in the 60-plus age group. So they were all the more susceptible. Between, say, January, February to now, we have lost several hundred judges, a remarkable number of judges. However, the people of McHenry County have really stepped up, and we are in a really good position. We're still recruiting. We still want to hear from you if you're interested in being a judge, because in addition to the conventional sort of thought about election judges on election day at polling places, we're expecting we're going to have more early voting, and we're encouraging people to vote early. And there's also that element of the signature verification that'll be done by judges, and some of the other work that'll be done in relation to the vote by mail that's going to be done by judges too. So we have an unprecedented need, and the people of McHenry County have really stepped up.
Will all that signature verification and all that, will that happen in your office in the annex building?
It will happen. We've had to, we've commandeered most of the open space in this building. Yes, we have a team right now anticipating around 20 to 25 people who will begin doing that as their all day, everyday job. Again, these are election judges to come and verify signatures all day long.
Adam asks one more question. Are the polling places changing? Are we going to be changing locations? Or are we going to have the same polling places we had during the primary? If I recall correctly, the primary took place right at the very beginning of the lockdown that we had in March. What's the story, and how are you going to communicate right up to election day? The fact that a polling place may have moved, or people may be voting in a different location at the last moment even.
Right.
How's that handled?
So I think there's two questions there. So have things changed since March? And the answer is absolutely yes. Back when we were preparing for that spring election, as you said, Steve, COVID was just sort of beginning, and we were just getting a sense for what it meant. Tom Annarella and I, Tom from Valley High, had been talking, and I reached out to the other senior congregate homes, and we offered them to not participate, and they gleefully accepted. I shouldn't say gleefully. I think they take the opportunity to serve the people and their residents, but they knew it was the better thing to do. And then later that day, in fact, the Department of Public Health said that is the thing they should do. So we just beat the bell on that one. So those places are still off the menu. In addition, a number of places have asked to be removed for this election, and I can understand that. Country Inn and Suites was an early voting place that many people loved, and I had a long discussion with the manager there. And the fact is, that's where some people live, even if it's only for a couple days. And to have a parade of strangers through there, it would be hard for anybody to keep that clean and sanitized up to their level of expectation. So there are a number that have changed. So for those that are affected by the change, you will be mailed, and we've been printing them all day long for several days. You will be mailed new voter registration cards with your new polling place on them. And in addition to that, it will be in the voter's guide, which will be in the newspaper in early to mid-October, if memory serves correctly. It's also going to be available in that polling place locator that Kelly had mentioned earlier in the chat. And to your point, to your question of what happens if one has to close, we were very fortunate here in McHenry County in that during our spring election, all of our polling places opened on time, and they closed at the right time, and we got results, and it was all good. A lot of jurisdictions weren't that lucky. Milwaukee only had 5 polling places by the end of its primary. DuPage County lost 15, I think the Sunday before the Tuesday election. Now, should that happen, we have a plan that goes to a few different levels, including what we call a doomsday level. But so we have plans. So if the situation should come to pass that for whatever reason, so many people decide not to participate as election judges that we have to start closing polling places, we'll have signs that'll go at your polling place that will direct you to the new polling place. And we've talked with the county sheriff as well to use the Nixle system to notify people of these changes as well. So we're going to, and it'll be on our website, and we're going to try every way possible to get the word out. Another good reason to vote early. Another good reason to vote early. Another thing that's a little different that it slipped my mind is we're going to have on election day one site open that anyone can come to. Doesn't matter where you live. You can come there, and that's going to be here at the admin building. So again, if things get a bit strange, know that you can come here and vote no matter where you live in the county. All will be welcome at this location. So that's a change as well.
I have a question here from Greg. Do we have to put a stamp on our ballot if we use the U.S. mail? What if we use one of the ballot boxes, one of the drop boxes? What's the postage situation?
So for drop boxes, you absolutely do not have to use any postage. So there's a benefit if you're in the area, come by and drop it in our drop box. Another thing to mention, the drop box we have here at the county building is suitable height for drive up. So you could drive up and it's close enough to the curb. You should be able to drive up and drop it in there. Otherwise, if you're going to use the mail, you will have to apply postage.
How many ounces do you know offhand? What's going to be the?
I don't know, but I do know this. If it's short, it still gets delivered, and then I get charged for the difference. So either way, it'll get to me.
Okay, another reason my taxes might go up.
Yes,
All right.
pay one way or another.
Yeah, I got a question here from Doug. Is it true that if you request a mail-in ballot and don't use it or send it in, you can't vote in person on election day?
Not true at all. In fact, what I'm suggesting to a lot of people who are concerned about whether or not they'll be able to vote in person and want to make sure that they have an opportunity to vote, and to recap the details on this, if you go to McHenryCountyClerk.com, that brings you to my webpage. There's a news section. Also on Facebook, you'll find this. It's called a Belt and Suspenders Approach to Voting. Here's what we're recommending. Request the ballot. When you get it, follow the instructions, fill out the ovals, magnet clip it to your refrigerator, and hold on to it until you're ready to vote. Excuse me. And then when you're ready to vote, put it in your hand. And whether you're early voting or election day voting, go to the polling place. And if you get there and it's gone, or the line is a mile long, or for whatever reason you don't want to go in or can't go in, you can now take this and bring it to our drop box. If it's election day and it's before the last pickup, then you can drop it in the post office on election day. But if you get there and everything's fine, and we're hoping that it will be, you'll bring it to the judge. When they ask you for your name and address, give them that ballot and say, I'd like to surrender my ballot and vote in person. And they'll say, thanks. They'll do a couple extra clicks on the keyboard, and you'll go and you'll vote as you normally did. If you lose your ballot, lose your mail-in ballot, when you get to the polls, you can tell them that you lost it. They'll look up, they can tell if we've received the ballot already. If we've already received it, that's a little bit of a different story. But and at that point, you can vote a provisional ballot. So in the case, if there's a Stephen Reick Jr. at your same address, and maybe we didn't recognize the junior or something like that, we'll take it provisionally. That'll give us 14 days to work through the issues. And if it's legitimate, then we'll cast that ballot. And if it's not, then it won't be cast. But if you know that you lost it, your dog ate it or whatever, and we know that we haven't accepted it, then you fill out a little like 3x5 affidavit that basically says the vote I placed today is my vote, and that other vote by mail piece, you can disregard it, and you can still go ahead and vote.
When does early voting start, like at these various remote locations and in your office? What's the first day that you can actually walk in and vote?
So you actually vote as soon as a week from today, the 24th of September. Can you believe it? And then after that, it opens up to the wider locations beginning October 19th. So it's here for a few weeks and only here for a few weeks. And then it expands to I think it's 11 more locations, 10 or 11 more locations around the county for people to vote.
Okay, got a question here from Brian. When was the last time the McHenry County voter rolls were audited and updated? For instance, getting rid of dead people, removing them from the voter list. And how are citizens supposed to know the mail-in ballots are truly going to a registered voter? How are the mail-in ballots validated? Good question.
So there's a couple questions in there. So our voter registration rolls are constantly being cleaned. We get feeds from the Secretary of State. We get feeds from the post office about people who've moved and died, and Social Security as well. So they're constantly being cleaned, pruned, if you will. The other question was, how do we know that they're going to registered voters? Is that the question?
Yeah.
As I talked about before, that this certification envelope that we have here, the only way that you can get one of those is if you are a registered voter. The only ballot that I'm going to count that comes by mail comes in one of those certification envelopes. And what one of the things that Big Al does is when he scans those envelopes, he's looking to make sure that there's a barcode on the outside of this envelope, not on your ballot, but on the outside of the envelope, and that links back to the voter. And if they're not registered, that vote gets sent to the bad pile.
Okay, we have one here from John. I don't trust vote by mail and want to be sure my vote is counted. I would prefer to vote on election day, but I'm older and can't stand in line for a long time. What should I do?
You know, if John's concern is the post office part of that, then what he can do is ask for a vote by mail ballot and drive up and drop it off at the drop box here in front of the county building. That's about as direct a line between you and me as there's ever going to be, and so that's what I would recommend. Or vote early. You know, like I said before, there's hardly ever a line. On the very first day, there's going to be a line. On the last day, there's going to be a line. In those middle days, hardly ever 2 or 3 people in the polling place. So vote early is another option.
Got a question here from Gina. What safeguards are in place in McHenry County to prevent vote by mail ballot harvesting and other forms of voter fraud? I'm assuming about going into a nursing home or something like that.
Yeah, ballot harvesting is a potential problem. We've done a few things on social media to tell people not to not to fall prey to the people who are trying to help them by collecting their ballot and turning it in for them. That's a hard one to absolutely stop, because if the guy who shows up at your door is a friendly face and I didn't think about it, I got to go pull that in, this guy is going to let me have it. That's an enticement, but I don't think that's so I don't think the harvesting and the return part of that is a high volume, high probability problem. Some people are concerned that on the outbound side, where it comes to the person's home, that they're going to go through and pull them out of people's mailboxes. Again, the difference there is this signature verification. You're not going to be able to sign your signature like Larry does, and so that's just gonna fall on its face.
Sharon asks, what guarantees do we have that every mail-in ballot will be counted? Also, if voting in person, can I help my disabled husband fill out his ballot? I suppose the same question would apply to a mail-in ballot. Can I help my disabled husband or wife fill out that ballot?
Well, and obviously, if it's mail-in, it's a little harder for us to watch over. In person, it's a little different. So if it depends on the nature of the disability, it depends on that person's interest in being helped. Sometimes, Chris and Pat show up, and Chris wants to help Pat, and Pat doesn't necessarily want to help. So it's a very private thing, and people want their privacy. So for people with disabilities, especially ones that have to do with either sight or physical dexterity, we have tools that allow them to vote without anybody else's assistance. And so the judge should ask you if you need assistance. And then if you do, then we can arrange for assistance, including using some of those tools.
Catherine just sent in a question. Can Joe show on an envelope exactly where to sign on the ballot envelope? And is any pen fine? Do you need a certain color? Is a pencil okay?
So I'm covering up the name on this envelope. This is the certification envelope, and you'll see right there below my hand, there's a box there, and it says signature by vote by mail voter required. That is the part you need to sign. Good question, Catherine. We recommend a black or blue, dark blue pen. However, if that's not it, worst case that'll happen is that Big Al here will reject it as not being able to see it, and then it will just have to be handled manually. So it's not a lost cause.
Rick wants to know, I received 3 different vote by mail applications. Is this fraud? How do I know which one to send in? How will you prevent dishonest people from sending in multiple vote by mail applications if they receive several of them?
Sure. So Rick, I'm surprised you only got 3. Because everybody and their brother is working this vote by mail thing. So the good news is, Rick, assuming that you're a registered voter, when we get the first one in, we're going to enter you in our system, and we're going to queue you up to have a ballot mailed to you. And when the second one comes in, we're going to say, we already have that. And the third one and the 8th one and the 11th one. So you're not going to get 11 ballots. You're going to get just one. And it will, again, come with this certification envelope. And what you can't see is right here is it's pre-printed with your name and address on there. And it will have your signature on there. And that's the key to the whole thing, which is, again, analogous to what you have when you go and vote in person. You have that, we call it an application. They ask you for your name and address. You put a little sticker on a sheet. You sign that sheet. They compare your signature. It's the same. It's the same data, same process.
Sandra wants to know, with delays within the Postal Service, what guarantees do we have that our ballots will be received and counted? What's the likelihood that we will have reliable election results on election night?
So to answer those questions backwards, election night will be anticlimactic. Especially, we have probably around 50,000 vote by mail requests now. If we assume that every one of those were to vote, get those ballots and vote them, we may not have very meaningful results on election night. We wait up to 14 days to receive ballots that are postmarked by election day to call the election over. And at that point, we count whatever we have, and that's that. Now, to answer her earlier question, which I think was one about the confidence in the post office, I use the post office all the time. I know everybody here does. I get and I send, and better than 99% of the time, it works exactly the way I expect it to, has for centuries. To be frank, I think the hullabaloo over the post office and whether or not it can be trusted or it's working or not is political hyperbole. A lot of what was seen in the press with the truck full of mailboxes isn't what they would have you believe it is. There's a place right across the border in Wisconsin that is the nationwide hub for restoration of mailboxes, and a lot of those pictures came from that location where they fix or destroy mailboxes. I have a call nearly every week with the gentleman who's in charge of election mail for southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois, roughly. He is confident. And let me back up a little bit, that the mail will continue to operate as it always has. Now, we have a bit of a problem in Illinois where our law does not comport with those expectations. So the law says that you can request a vote by mail ballot from me as late as October 29th. So if I receive your vote by mail ballot request on October 29th and I send it back to you, first class mail, the expectation for first class mail is 5 days. So 5 days from the 29th is going to be on the other side of the election. I'm never going to get that ballot back postmarked with election day. That is a bad bit of statute.
Can somebody come into your office and request a vote by mail ballot personally without mailing the app? I'm sure they have to fill out the application and give it to you just as they normally would.
Right.
They can come into your office and request a VBM and you will give it to them?
They sure can. They sure can. But if they did it, if they did it by mail or some other process, and I received it on the 29th and they wanted it mailed back to them, there'd just be no chance that they'd be able to use that ballot.
All right. Cheryl wants to know, what if I forget to sign the envelope? Will my ballot be valid?
So if we get ones that are that aren't signed, what we're going to attempt to do is contact that person and see if we can reach them and get them to come in and sign in person. So if they forget, we've got a process for that, assuming that we can reach them in time.
Will that signature, let's say you get an unsigned ballot unsigned ballot like on election day, will that person's vote be valid if they come in on November 4th and sign that ballot, that envelope?
Yeah, I'm operating off the cuff here. There's a certain time frame. There's a couple of days that you have to cure the issues that you may have, and I don't remember how many days right offhand how many that is, but it's a reasonable amount of time, I feel, to fix that.
All right, we're in the home stretch here. We have a couple of questions left. Kimberly wants to know, regarding changes to vote by mail, why is the process changing so close to an election? There is an absentee ballot, early voting, and election day voting. This should cover every person who wants to vote. Voting in person is safer than shopping at Walmart. The experts have said there is no reason not to vote in person with masks and social distancing. Sounds like Kimberly was paying attention to the General Assembly arguments back in May, but
there really aren't any material changes to vote by mail other than the drop boxes and the fact that there was a big push to get people to participate. But the process is the same. So there haven't been that many changes in that regard. If you can vote in person and you wish to vote in person, I encourage you to vote. I'd encourage you to vote early if you can. You still get the patriotic feeling of sticking your ballot in the tabulator. You just won't have to wait in the line, and you can do it a lot more different places at your leisure.
Stuart, this is more directed at me than I guess you. It says, I'm an election judge and I would like you to introduce and pass legislation requiring everyone who enters a polling place, whether during early voting or on election day, to wear a mask properly over your nose and to observe social distancing on pain of ejection and or arrest. We are all nervous about our health, and this would help, among other things, to encourage more poll workers to show up for duty in this exceptional election season. I'll take that one. The governor's executive orders dealing with social distancing and mask wearing and all of that stuff will apply on election day at the polling places just as they would in any other location where you are indoors. So no. Okay. There's the expert.
Yeah. So let me start by saying that I understand there's a lot of people that don't want to wear a mask. And I understand that. Frankly, I don't want to wear a mask. I mean, they're uncomfortable, and I spent most of my life not wearing a mask, and that is how I'm most comfortable. Now, having said that, if I go into a restaurant, if I go in public places, I wear a mask, for the benefit of the restaurant in some cases, benefit of my fellow citizens in other cases. So to the people who would choose not to wear a mask or prefer not to wear a mask, I am asking as kindly as I possibly can for you, for that short time that you have to be at the polling place, for the benefit of your fellow citizens, for the people who are more susceptible, on the off chance that you may have some possibility of carrying a disease, if you would be so kind as to wear a mask for that short amount of time, I would personally be very thankful. I can't force you to wear one. We're not going to try to force you to wear one. We're going to encourage you to wear one. We're going to provide you one if you've forgotten yours. But we can't prevent you from voting if you don't wear a mask. We have an extraordinary amount of PPE and cleaning supplies for the polling places, hundreds of gallons of hand sanitizer, tens of thousands of wipes, masks, I think close to 40,000 masks. So we're in good shape in that way. So the poll workers have no reason to fear they will be covered and cleaned pretty continuously. But for the benefit of all those, for those who wish not to, I would simply ask as a favor to your fellow Americans, if you can see to doing it for a few minutes, we'd certainly appreciate it.
I withdraw my prior remarks. Joe knows the situation here obviously better than I do, and I would echo his request that, again, this is election day is a day of national coming together. Let's look at this and come together, and let's get through election day in the most in the safest way possible. I completely agree with what Joe said. Joe, I think we're on the last question here, and Loretta says, what happens if you don't have enough election judges? Will all polling places be open? How can I be sure my vote counts if my polling place isn't open?
So if your polling place isn't open, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, so we have contingency plans. We looked at some of these situations like Louisville, Kentucky, when they had their primary a couple months ago, population 600,000, and they had one polling place open, and we do not want to be there. And I don't believe we'll be anything close to that, God willing. But it's not unreasonable to think that we could have some impacts, and so it's a good thing to prepare. So we have preparations in place, and if, for example, you're used to voting at the church, and let's say all the poll workers call in sick that morning, we'll send you to the township road district location or wherever, and they will be able to take your vote at that location, and it will count just as if you had done it at your proper home native polling place.
Okay, I lied to you. There is one more question.
All right.
Dee wants to know, will there be partitions between the election judges and the voters, like plexiglass or something?
We looked at the plexiglass, and we opted to not do plexiglass for a handful of reasons. Probably the two biggest ones are they seemed unstable. So the nature of the interaction between the voter and the poll worker is such that there'd have to be a fairly high opening to get our poll book through there, and then to exchange the data back and forth. And with that opening, that high, it just seemed, it seemed a little unstable. It also doesn't do anything to protect me against the people on either side of me. And it's not at all unusual that you have to get up. And some of the jobs in the polls are very mobile. So what we opted for instead are plastic face shields. And so the judges will have face shields available to them as well as masks. They can wear both if they wish. So we thought that gave them the best. It's sort of like carrying your plexiglass with you.
Yeah.
And that you can look over here, you can look over there, and you're continued to be covered by that plastic.
Okay, we've been doing this for an hour now, and Joe, I truly appreciate all the answers, and I appreciate all the questions from people who took the time to send them to us. Joe, you got any final thoughts, any final comments that you want to make?
Vote early if you can. If you want to vote by mail, we love you to vote by mail. Do that early as well. You know, if you're in the same way when you're sending out your Christmas cards, you know that it's going to take a little longer because of the influx. So we're recommending people mail their ballots back by mid-October if at all possible. I don't know that there'd be a lot that could happen, you know, between October 15 and November 3rd that's going to completely rock your world and change your opinion of who it is you're going to vote for. I could be wrong. You know, vote early. And if you're voting in person, vote early as well. So I guess vote early would be the, Oh, and Catherine asked, am I willing to do one of these Q&As with other organizations throughout the county? Absolutely. I'm visiting with the Rotarians on the 30th. I spoke to both the chairman of the Republican and Democratic parties and offered myself to speak to any of their groups, help them in whatever way I can. So absolutely.
Joe, again, thank you very much. And to everyone watching, I want you to know, first of all, this presentation is being recorded, and it will be online on my legislative Facebook page. You'll be able to go through and listen again if you wish, or send it off, share it with people who may not have been able to be online tonight. But I will say in closing, folks, this year is unlike any other in our history. We've got there's a lot of angst out there on a lot of things. Let's not let the voting process be part of that which divides us. Let's use the voting. Let's use this voting season as a reason for us to come together and think about the bigger things that affect us in our society, especially here in the state of Illinois. We got big problems, folks. And your voice, your vote, regardless of who you vote for, it matters. And please, let's all do the right thing and vote early, vote in person, vote on election day if it's available, but please exercise your franchise. It's so precious. How many people have died to give us this? So with that, I will say good night and go White Sox.
Oh.